Hi, I'm Jeremy, and today we're going to look at the 9th game in my Spiel des Jahres winner series. The Spiel des Jahres is the German Game of the Year award, and I'm looking at all the games that won that award. And this one probably does not need much of an introduction if you're watching this video. It is the Settlers of Catan, and this was the 1995 Spiel des Jahres winner. It's designed by Klaus Teuber. It's a game that plays from 3 to 4 players in the base game, although there's an expansion that lets it go up to 6 players in about 90 minutes or so. And the box says ages 10 and up. And this is, I think, probably the top selling of all Spiel des Jahres winners, certainly the most famous one that I could think of. And it is essentially the game that's credited with making contemporary board games as we think of them popular in the U.S. Again, this game probably does not need much in the way of a rules explanation or an introduction, but I will give you an overview of the game for a few minutes, and then I'll come back and let you know what I think about the Settlers of Catan. So here we have the setup of a 4-player game of Catan using the recommended setup, although once you've started to play more often, you could do a variable setup where these tiles and these numbers are going to be randomized. At the start of the game, each player is going to begin with 2 settlements on the board. The settlements are going to be placed at the various indices between 3 hexes or 2 hexes. So for example, here, here, and here. And each settlement will have 1 road extending off of it at the game start. Players are then going to receive goods for the tiles that they are adjacent to. So for example, this space here produces an ore, this space here produces a wheat, and this space here produces a brick. So red would get those, and then over here they get a wheat, a sheep, and a wood. So wheat, sheep, and wood. And so these are going to be the player's starting hands. And then after each player has taken those starting goods, the game will begin. And the game's played over a number of rounds until a player reaches 10 points. And then if you have 10 points on your turn, you will win the game. You're going to get points by extending out on the map and building cities. You'll get them for settlements rather. You'll get them for upgrading your settlements into cities. And then you could also get points for having either the largest army or the longest road. These are each worth 2 points. Or for collecting cards. Some of these cards which will give you points. So for example, this university card will give you 1 victory point, or this palace will give you 1 victory point. So these development cards that you'll also be able to build will give you points. Okay, so the way that the game works is that on your turn you're going to be doing essentially 3 different things. You're going to roll to have a production of goods. So for example, here I've rolled a 9, and what that means is that every hex that has a 9 on it, and so there's going to be 1 here, and there's going to be 1 here. Sorry, I had it upside down. Those are going to produce goods for the people who have settlements or cities next to it. So for example, here the orange player would get 1 wheat, and for this hex each of these 2 players would get 1 sheep. And if you have a city next to a hex for each city that you have, you'll get 2 resources of that type. And you'll notice that these numbers on these cities are variable numbers, and the tokens on there show you the probability of that number coming up. So this 11 has a low probability of coming up, whereas a 6 has a relatively high probability coming up. So most players know that, but that's just there as a guide. So you generally will want to build next to cities that are going to produce more often. So the first thing you do is you just roll that, and then you will do a production phase. If you roll a 7 on your turn, then that instead of doing a production phase, the robber will move. And essentially the way that the robber works is first every player will look at the number of cards that they have in their hand. If any player has 8 or more of these resource cards in their hand, they're going to need to discard half of those cards rounded down. So for example, if I had 9 resource cards, I'd have to discard 4 of those back to the supply. So that will happen. And then the second thing that happens when the robber is activated is he will move to a space, so whoever rolled the dice will be able to pick a hex, and essentially he will keep that space from producing. So in future turns, if the robber is still present in this space and a 4 is rolled, these players won't get anything, although any other 4s would pay out, so this hex would still pay out. So that's the first thing that's going to happen is the production / robber phase. The second thing that's going to happen is trading. So players are going to be able to look at the cards that they have and look at what they need versus this building cost chart. And then they will be able to initiate trades. And they could do trades either to the bank. You could always trade 4 of a kind for any one good. So if I had 4 sheep, for example, I need a wood, I could turn in 4 sheep and take a wood. And that doesn't require anybody's permission. You could trade at a port. And that's if you have a city or a settlement that's built next to a port, you could trade as shown on the port. So for example, here you could see there is a 2-to-1, and maybe it would help if I zoomed in there. There's a 2-to-1. You could trade any 2 coal for any one, or any 2 ore for any other resource here. Or some spaces just have 3-to-1. That just reduces your basic trading cost from 4-to-1 to 3-to-1 as long as you have a city or a settlement there. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is that you could freely trade with other players. So for example, you could say, I have a sheep. Does anybody have an ore for my sheep? And so on. And that's a free range trading, but other players could only trade with the active player. Once all the trading is completed, then you're allowed to do buildings. And you could build any number of these things as long as you have the cards to do so. So to build a road, you would need a brick and a wood. And whenever you build roads, you have to basically place them adjacent to your existing settlements, cities, or roads. So you could extend your network by doing that, or you could essentially just build roads like this. If ever a player builds 5 or more roads in a row, and they have the single largest number of roads, then they get to take this longest road card. And as you can see here, this is going to be worth 2 victory points. If ever somebody supersedes, not ties, but exceeds the number of roads that you have on the board. So right now, blue has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If ever anybody built a chain of 6 roads, they would be able to claim this card, and they would keep that until another player beats 6 roads. So this is going to be standing victory points. Second thing is to build a settlement. You could build settlements as long as they are at least 2 hexes away from an additional or an existing hex. So for example, if blue built roads here and here, they could build a settlement here. And you can see this is 1, 2 away from this white and 1, 2 away from this red. So that would be a valid placement. And that's going to cost 1 brick, 1 wood, 1 wheat, 1 sheep. Then, if you wanted to, you could upgrade cities for a cost, or upgrade 2 cities for a cost of 2 wheat, 3 ore, and that essentially increases your production. And cities are worth 2 victory points as opposed to the 1 victory point that a settlement is worth. So you would just swap those pieces out. And then the last thing that you could do during the build phase is to buy a development card. And you're only going to be able to play 1 of those per turn, but you can buy as many as you want, and they cost 1 sheep, 1 wheat, and 1 ore. And those development cards you're going to buy, you can't play them the same turn that they're built, but they could do various things. So a lot of them are going to be these knight cards, and you're going to keep, as you play these, you'll keep them in front of you. And what they do is they allow you to move the robber, so you just get to relocate the robber to stop an area from producing. And then you could select 1 card, 1 resource card from the owner of one of the cities that's borders that. So for example, if I moved it here, I could steal from red, white, or blue. You'll keep those in front of you, and eventually, as you build up those knights, you will qualify for the largest armies bonus. So this is also worth 2 victory points, like the longest road bonus, and you need to have at least 3 knights in front of you, and then in order to keep, you will keep this until another player has more knights in front of them. So if I had 3 in front of me, another player got 4, they would steal this until somebody then got 5 and took it back. So the other types of development cards are pretty simple. There's some that are just one-time benefits, and there's some that you could hold on that would be worth victory points at the end of the game if you revealed them. And that is one way that you'll easily get to 10 points. So there are also these one-off effects, such as this one here, this Monopoly card, and essentially that you would be able to say, you know, declare a resource type. So for example, sheep, and all players would have to give you their sheep cards. Or there's another one like that called, you know, for example, road building, that lets you build 2 roads as if you had just built them. So that's just an instant 2 roads. And I think there's one other type. Yeah, Year of Plenty. And this one, it allows you to take any 2 resources from the bank, and then you add them to your hand, and they could be any type of resource. So those are the various cards that you would find in the deck from the development card deck. So essentially, that's how a turn is going to work. You're going to, like I said, you're going to produce or move the robber, you're going to trade, and then you're going to build. That's going to be an entire turn, and players are just going to keep doing that over and over until one player reaches 10 points. The first to reach 10 points will be the winner. Okay, so as I'm sure you probably knew, that is the Settlers of Catan, and if you haven't played this game, I would suggest that you do play it. It really is a benchmark or a watershed title in the contemporary board gaming. I think that it has the reputation, at least now in 2016, 20 years after the fact, of a game that a lot of people use to get introduced to the board gaming hobby and then graduate onto other more complicated games. But, this is something that I've never, really subscribed to. This is a game that I'm usually pretty happy to go back and play. It's, aged pretty well. I think the mechanics are well integrated and smooth. The hand management, essentially, you never want to build up a huge number of cards in your hand in case that robber hits, is interesting. As is the trading, which, again, people can sometimes get shut out of that, especially as they near 10 points, which could drag the game on. But if you play with a group that trades pretty fairly and openly, the game, I think, flows really nicely. It has a nice mix of tactics and long-term planning between trying to, extend your routes and also deal with the cards that you get dealt. There is some luck in the game as a result of those dice, but I think that that's perfectly fine in a strategy game. Some judge this game harshly for having that dice luck in it, but indeed they've actually built a deck of cards that you could use that has all the die results in it, so you could normalize the die results. But I don't think that's by any means necessary. But it just goes to show how opposed some people are to luck in their strategy games. But, overall, I think that this is, a game that largely does hold up. Plenty of people still play it, and love it. So, far be it from me to say, don't enjoy it. And the game has been tremendously successful. It's spawned a number of expansions, of standalone spin-off games, of, rethemings, and of, there's a dice game, multiple card games, all, under the Catan line. So, this game's success, I think, to a large degree speaks for itself. It's really been, I think, to, a large extent, the epitome of what, the Spiel the Jahres award is meant to do, which is broaden the hobby. And you can't understate, its impact that it's had in that respect. I will note that when I tend to play the game, we tend to use, additional cubes or what have you to do what's called the welfare variant. This is a variant that's been around for years now. And essentially what that means is that whenever the dice are rolled, if you do not get something, unless the robber comes up, if you do not get something as a result of that production phase, you get a cube. And you could turn in cubes equal to the number of victory points that you have showing to get one resource. So if I only have 3 points showing on the board, I could turn in 3 cubes to take a resource of my choice. And this tends to speed the game up, especially if people aren't trading a lot, and it's just makes the game flow more smoothly, I find. So this is just a variant that I use, and it's almost become an official variant because recently I've got this this variant which has Santa Claus in it, where Santa's going to move around the board, much like the robber, and he will distribute gifts to players. And these gifts, I don't know if you could see clearly here, but they are essentially the various incarnations of Catan, the expansions, and the dice game and whatnot. And the players will be able to turn in those gifts for for a resource of their choice. So that functions much like the welfare variant that we've been playing for years. And it's interesting that that's become, an official expansion. I haven't yet tried that expansion, but, I've tried the welfare variant plenty of times, and that's my preferred way to play. So, in all, I think Catan is definitely, has proven itself well and beyond whatever I could say about the game. But it is a game that I do enjoy to play. It's not something that tends to hit the table as much as you might think. I think a lot of people, think of Catan as something almost, like Monopoly, as something passé and, something that's beneath them to play at this point. But I think that reputation isn't quite deserved. So those are my thoughts on the Settlers of Catan, and thanks for watching.